In this lesson, we'll look at how attributes can be used to modify an HTML tag. Now, if I was making this web page for a client, that client might direct me that the directions for this recipe are very important and that those directions should stand off the page. Perhaps make the title Directions red so that it has greater emphasis to the viewer. Well, how do we do that? When we look at the HTML code for this page, we can see that we're using a heading tag to structure the words ingredients and directions, which we can see on our web browser show up in Times New Roman and bolded and a little bit smaller than the main title of the web page, Recipe Chocolate Ice Cream, because we're using an H2 tag instead of an H1 tag. But how do I override the default property of the H2 tag so that instead of showing up in black, it shows up in red? The way that we'll do this is we will use attributes to modify the behavior of the heading element, which is defined with an H2 and closing H2 tag wrapped around the word directions. We're going to explore cascading style sheets in a future lesson in detail, but for right now we're going to look at a very small implementation of styles, and we'll do so by putting those styles in line in our HTML element. I'm using very specific terms to describe what I'm doing just so that you hear them for the first time. We're going to go through everything that I'm beginning to touch on in greater detail in future lessons. I'm just going to start using the terms that are going to become familiar to you over time so that you become accustomed to hearing them. So, we're going to put in an attribute on this opening H2 tag because it's this word, directions, which I'm highlighting in blue by double-clicking on the word. This word directions that we wish to make red instead of allowing the default black that the H2 element wants to create. So, to do this, we're going to use an attribute. I'm going to position my mouse inside the H2 tag after the 2 in H2 and type a space on my keyboard and then type the word style followed by an equal sign and then hit the quote key on your keyboard twice. What I'm doing here is referencing an attribute that's available in the H2 tag called style. HTML tags have usually a great many attributes available to you that allow you to modify those tags. And as we will with CSS, we will explore attributes in great detail as we move forward. But for right now, I want to introduce you to the style attribute, and just know that the style attribute is available on almost every HTML tag. Now, if I were to save this file and preview in a browser, I won't notice anything change yet. And nothing has changed because I haven't put anything in my style attribute yet. Where would I put something in my style attribute? We'd put it in between the quotes that follow the equal sign. This attribute is essentially a mechanism that modifies an HTML element by using a resource command, which is internal to the HTML language in the form of an attribute, saying, I want you to do the following to the style of the page. And now we have to define what we'd like to have happen. When we work with style sheets, and this is the first time you're seeing this, when we work with style sheets, we define properties and values that go with those properties. In this case, the property that allows us to change the color of text in cascading style sheets is called color. So I'm going to type color inside the quotes, but I separate my properties from my values using a colon. I'm then going to type a space, and I'm going to type the value that I want associated with that property. I just happen to know that the hexadecimal value for red is £FF0000. Almost every single graphics program out there has a panel which will allow you to look up the hexadecimal value for a given color. Tools such as Photoshop will allow you to retrieve this information very fast. But for right now, we'll just take this simple example of red and look at how we can retrieve other hexadecimal values in a future lesson. And to finish off my CSS property value pair, I'm going to type a semicolon. So if I take a step back now, before I do anything else, and just look at what I've done to the opening H2 tag, You can see up here in front of the word ingredients we have your standard H2 tag unmodified. But if we look at what we did to the directions H2 tag, the H2 in the H2 tag is still there. All we've done is add a style attribute to that opening H2 tag, and within the quotes of the style attribute, we put our very first CSS rule. That rule specifies that any text that's encompassed within this H2 element should have the color red. Now if we save our file from the File menu by selecting File and Save, and switch over to our web browser and hit Reload or Refresh, you can see that the text is overridden by your CSS rule and is displayed in red to the viewer.